we're going to work on using the color yellow, and we're going to actually put two objects on our canvas today. So I'm going to use a picture that I took a while ago of two lemons. I've prepped my canvas already with cadmium orange, and so now I'm going to take the chalk that I have in my hand here, and we're going to map out where we want to put our lemons. And I sort of do it with my hands a little bit to begin with, just to get an idea sort of where I'm going to go. And now I can start to sort of figure out a little bit more with my chalk. I'm going to do the top of my lemon, the bottom of my lemon, and then I can sort of round off the back part, come forward a little bit more, do that little bumpy part that lemons have. And sort of, and I'm going to lean forward here a little bit so I can see, make sure I've sort of got it in the right spot. I need this to round off a little bit more. Now I'm going to do the second lemon. The second lemon, again, what I'm going to do is to look at this space up in here. These negative spaces around our object are just as important as the objects themselves, because this space is what I'm going to be looking at my negative space to really sort of figure out where I'm going to go with my second lemon. So what I want is this space in here to correspond to this space up here, and as well this little space down here as well. So I'm going to draw that little part in there as well. Come around, and again I'm going to lean forward here a little bit just to see what I'm doing. Okay, it's great for you folks to see how I'm painting, but sometimes when I'm drawing things too much on an angle, it does get a little distorted. So pardon the back of my head a bit if I sort of lean forward. And I think we're sort of ready to start. I think that's sort of it. Okay, chalk down, brush up. Again, nice filbert, put it in the water. We don't want lots of water on. I've misted my palette already, and now I'm going to start by doing an underpainting of my lemons. What color do you think it's going to be? What's the underpainting going to be? What color? That's right, I heard you all. Purple, you're right on. So we're going to take our purple, move it forward, pick up a little bit of white, add it to that, because we don't want it a really strong purple, like a really deep purple. I want it along the same tonal values that are going to be yellow. If I did it a really deep purple, like a straight purple out of the tube, it'd be way too dark. It'd be very difficult to cover. So I'm going to start lathering on my paint here a bit. You've found probably, I think, in most of the paintings that we've been doing so far, that you do need to add white to your paints anyway, just so they cover, and making them therefore opaque versus being what they are. Basically, they are really, most of the colors that we use are transparent. I'm going to add a little bit more white to this whole thing here, because I want this spot to be a lot lighter, because this is sort of where the light is hitting a bit. So I'm going to make that a little bit lighter. Now, I've made my outside edges. I've done something here wrong. Do you see what it is? I've made my outside edges too dark, so I'm going to lighten those up a bit. And you can see just through the use, even with just using purple, how that rounds that back edge off versus having it so dark. When we use dark colors, regardless of what they are, it brings things closer to us, which is good to know when we want things to come closer to us. But the things that are going away from us, which includes edges, we do not want those so dark. We want them nice and light. So we also can do that magic little trick, and you can see it in the photo a bit, and we do that little lightish spot, especially across the bottom. And again, that helps to turn our edges. So we got sort of this guy basically done. I'm going to continue with the other one as you continue watching, and we'll build these up, and then we'll come back and we'll start painting yellow on top. The purple color is complementary to yellow. It also, when we do this underpainting, it also helps us to establish the tonal values that we want. It also helps to establish, now that we're using two objects, to see whether or not we've got them placed in the right position or not. Because we can now, in a very simple way that we've used a color that we're not too worried about, establish this point, that we can now see whether or not we've got these set up in the right spot and so on. And it's always nice, I think, to do this underpainting to really establish those tonal values, because it starts you really starting to see those tonal values. Tonal values are simply light and dark. They come from a light direction. So when the light hits our object, we are creating different tones, different shading, and that's what gives our objects, whatever they happen to be, perspective. So we're going to start painting these guys yellow. Finally, we get down to painting some yellow. I've got two colors of yellow out here. I've got cadmium yellow medium, cadmium yellow dark. I also have a cadmium orange out, which is always a staple. Most of these, the palette that I have out here now, is generally my sort of basic sort of go-to palette anyway, adding a few colors here and there that I need if I'm obviously doing something a little bit different. But basically these are the colors I'm going to use primarily just about in everything I paint. So yellow. Yellow itself is a very, very transparent color, so we really do need to add white to it. I'm going to add a little puddle of cad yellow medium. Now I'll do one with some cad yellow dark. You're also going to find that your lemon, the lemon itself, to get these sort of darker areas in here, and sort of not so much through here, but a little bit more through here, what color do you think you're going to add to your yellow to make it darker? I'll just let you think about that for a minute and we'll come back to it. So I'm going to start sort of over on this side here. It's a little bit too yellow for my taste, so I'm going to add a little bit of this cadmium orange to my yellow and put that down, and that's a little bit better. The other thing that we're going to look at today when we're painting our lemons is we're going to start to, well, you're going to see, but I'm going to stress more that we start to use what I call this sort of stacking method of applying color. Now, whether or not you achieve that is something else, because it does take practice, but the reason I like to introduce it more and more as we are moving along is because most people, for the most part, students primarily, overblend things. We overblend our colors. And when we overblend our colors, we lose, what I say, the integrity of the original color. So we have a bunch of colors down here. We end up going blend, 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 blend. And pretty soon it all looks the same. It all looks the same because we've blended it all together, so it is all basically one color. And we want separate colors. We do want our colors to show through. And to do this, we're going to do a method that's called stacking our colors. So we're just going to lay them sort of side by side. Now we can do this two ways. You can either, I'll put my brush down here for a second. You can either put your colors like side by side like this, like right together, and soften, and then just soften the edge between them. Or you can put your color down, your other color that you're going to do here, and then do a transitional color in between. So it's either color, color abutting, and then just soften the edge between them, like blend the edge between those two. Or what I generally do is like color, color, do a transitional bar or color in between. The eye, strangely enough, then does the blending for you. It's something that I learned, and I think I've mentioned this before, when a student that I was teaching was studying Cézanne. And it was through his efforts that I came to understand this process better. And it's a lovely way to paint. So we just sort of, you can see I just sort of put my colors in. There is sort of a transition through these colors. It's very subtle. You can see as well, sometimes I get too much paint on my brush and I'll give it sort of like a squeeze. So in other words, I sort of twist it on my palette and sort of get rid of some of that paint because it's a little bit too much. I also don't wash my brush in between when I'm switching colors. I will, I mean, that's a lie. I will wash my brush, say if I'm going from yellow and orange and whatever, and over to the other side of my palette, and I'm going to be using blues and greens. Of course, I will wash my brush then. If I'm using in the same family, no. And this is what I call painting with a dirty brush. It's not dirty as in muddy dirty, but it's got other colors on it. And I don't mind that because it helps me maintain that sort of connection of my colors all the way through. And that's what we want to do. We want to try and maintain that connection through our painting. Now you can see this, it's still not covering completely. That's okay. I don't sort of freak out over all that stuff. I'm going to go back to a little bit more orange on top here, a little bit more of this sort of. And I don't use a really like gobs of paint, as you can see as well. Now I'm going to sort of squeeze this a little bit. Squeeze it out. I'm going to take a little bit of this pure yellow over here, and I'm going to darken it. Here we go. Did you figure this out, how I'm going to darken my yellow? If you said purple, you were right. I'm going to darken it with purple because it's its complementary color. So I'm going to put that through here. And a little bit sort of through the front. These colors will change a little bit more as I move forward, but right now it's giving me a little bit of what I want. I think that's the other issue that people have when they're painting, is that they try to get the absolute perfect color in the first go around, as I say, or the first sort of brush stroke that you're taking. Give up on that because it's very difficult. For one thing, you don't really want to do that. It's much nicer. You're going to find your paintings have a lot more depth to them if we do a little bit more of this sort of color on top of color on top of color a little bit. But we need to not get so caught up in trying to establish that perfect color from the first blush of trying to put color down. We're trying to come close, but I don't worry about it so much. And I am going to clean my brush now because I'm finding it's getting a little bit too thick, a whole bunch of paint here that I'm not able to sort of pick up what I really want. The other thing is I really want to go really light into this area here, and that's going to be hard to do with what I've got on my brush. So I'm going to clean my brush so I can pick up some really lighter colors for where the highlight is. Now I'm going to make sure that I take off most of the water off my brush, as you can see. And sometimes what I'll do then is give it a couple of good bangs on my paper towel too, just to make sure I've got it all off. Pick up some white, move this over, and we're going to put some of this lighter stuff in here. I'm going to go back into this and now paint into it. I'm going to leave the center part of that where it is and start to paint a little bit more of this color into it. I'm going to just swipe my brush here because I don't need to wash it, and then I'm just going to soften off those edges. And now we've got that nice lighter color there. I'm going to pick up a little bit more of it through here. And a little bit more, sort of lost a bit of it, so I'm going to have to make up a little bit more, put a little bit more back into there. This center part got sort of lost here again too, so I'm going to just put a little bit more back in there again, and then soften off the edges a bit. Now, I've got my lemon basically started. We're just at the very beginning of making this lemon look like a lemon. You're going to notice too that when I paint, I don't paint sort of, you know, this color goes here, this color goes there, and so on. I really do stay focused in the area where I'm painting, to be truthful. I really don't see anything else. If I'm focusing on one spot, for instance, in here, that's what I see. I'm not concerned of seeing anything else. I'm not even concerned, I'm not even looking at this lemon. I'm not seeing anything else except where I am painting. And it's a skill I realize that I do, and it's something that you will learn to do yourself as you move forward in painting or drawing, is to stay focused into small areas where you are not trying to see. That people start to see too much of the big picture, and you don't need to see everything. I mean, well, you do eventually, but to try and keep your focus just in that one area where you are working, and slowly build it up. Don't worry about if it's not perfect, because it will become perfect. Painting is something, strangely enough, it helps. If you don't have patience, which I don't have any of, but you will learn to have patience. You will become, the other thing is, which the lovely thing about painting is it's very therapeutic, in a sense that it just takes you into a whole other world, and that's where you stay. All those bills that you need to pay, whatever, you know, you need to go and see the mother-in-law or anything else that's sort of, you know, driving you crazy, everything is forgotten as you focus in and are trying to paint. It's wonderful. It's like, I highly recommend it. Anyway, I'm going to continue painting here, and you can continue painting along with me or watching, whatever which way you're doing it. And I'll just continue on. So you can see I've been really working on my lemons, and you're going to find any of these things that we are painting, it's going to take more than just 5 minutes or 10 minutes to do. And that's, again, as far as I'm concerned, sort of the beauty of it all. So I've got my colors sort of stacked a bit. You can sort of, from where you are sitting, you can probably see sort of some general gradation of color, which is nice, which is what I want. I'm going to do a few sort of final touches on here. And this is what I call a little bit of glazing, or just doing sort of, well, it is called glazing. A little bit of a thin paint. And I'm just going to do a little bit through here like this, which is going to soften that back edge a bit. And this is just some yellow with a fair bit of white, but it's fairly thin, as you can see on my palette. But it's not that watery that it's dripping, but it's just thinned enough that it's going to give me a little bit of the color that I want. And a little bit on the edge there. I'm going to do a little bit through this spot down here again, which will turn that edge. You can see by putting these spots in like this, how it starts to turn those edges. And that's what I want. I didn't put this one right on the edge because I wanted that sort of sweep coming through here. But I'm going to apply this a little bit sort of on the bottom, slightly through this little area here, which starts to sort of isolate it a little bit more, so it gives it that nice shape that we're looking for. And a few other little spots, especially through here. We're just going to see how that, again, rounds that edge under, which is sort of what we're looking for. So little touch-ups. I also took my cadmium yellow deep, made it very thin like this. I'll just show you. I've already done it, but I'll show you again. So I made it fairly thin like this. I didn't add any white to it, so it's still quite transparent. And use that as a wash or a glaze right over top into this area, because this is the spot that I want coming forward. This is the spot I want coming forward. And how we're going to do that? We've done it by intensifying the yellow. Was I able to do that by just one brush stroke? No, it's been about 4 or 5 layers of paint going on this, especially this area, to help bring this spot, this area forward. So now through the colors that I've used, the tonal values that I've used, I'm creating this nice forward motion of this lemon coming this way. This little guy too, I didn't make, you can see in the picture, it's quite dark at the back. I did not make it quite so dark because again, dark colors do come forward. So I do want it darkish, but I want it quite cool. So I did a very light sort of wash of some green over top of that back and another color to make this color through here. I actually combined orange and a little bit of my Hooker's green to make this really nice color through here. I've also done my purple background already, so you can sort of see how the purple enhances the yellow. And that's sort of what this class is all about, well, among other things. So we've completed this class now. What we've done is we've managed to put 2 objects on one canvas, which is nice. We started this process of doing an underpainting and creating our tonal values so we could paint on top and actually see the tonal values already. We've already established that. We started by painting some very basic colors, some very basic shades of different things that we wanted using our yellow, mixing them up with some purple, a little bit more orange, and creating these nice colors that we wanted. We started this process of stacking or layering our colors side by side a little bit more rather than trying to overblend, because we're trying to get away from that. We don't want to overblend. We want to sort of put these things on. And here you can really see that transition. And to your eye, from where you're sitting, it looks like it's a nice blend. Up close, though, you would see that transition of color. And that's yellow and purple on our color wheel. The next one that we're going to do, which you're going to have lots of fun doing, are the grapes. Now they do take a lot more time, so allow yourself a couple of weeks anyway, probably, to finish them off, because they do take a while. So I hope you enjoyed doing the lemon today. I enjoyed doing it, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now. Today we're going to do our grapes. We have so far done, let's see, our red apple, so we did red and green. We did our orange, so we did orange and blue colors. And then we did our lemon, which were lemons, plural. We did yellow and purple. Today, as you can see with our grapes, it's sort of a multitude of different colors. So in actual fact, we don't need to do an underpainting. We're going to draw out our grapes, and then we're going to start painting right on top of our prepped canvas of cadmium orange. I'm also going to show you, though, that what we need to do is to learn perhaps to crop our images. We don't need to always put down exactly what our photo is showing. So I've got some others, or the back parts of some other photos, and I'm going to show you. So we can, for instance, come up here and just sort of, we can crop in here like that, for instance, or come down over here and do that sort of section, or maybe this part, because what I also want us to do today is to learn how to oversize an image to make it interesting. So making it oversized, obviously we're not going to get all these grapes in, and we do not want to get them in because, to be truthful, I think it would be rather boring. So I've cropped in to a section in here. This is the area that I'm going to focus in on. I'm going to take my trusty chalk and I'm going to start mapping out sort of where I want these fellows to be. So I'm going to start with this one, sort of put them in here a little bit like that, off to the edge. The little guy behind him, put him in, come into this fellow, sort of put him in. And you can see I'm going into a nice big size. The next one, start putting him in. And then I'm going to put this guy back there. He's sort of my favorite. I really have a real thing for this grape. He's really quite beautiful, I find, so I really like painting him. I've painted these a few times over the years. This is one of my favorite photos for grapes in particular, because they are so many colors and they're just fun to paint. The stems, I'm just sort of going to basically just do little lines in here so I can get an idea sort of where I want them to be. Okay, and I think I've got that sort of pushed in. Now, I'm going to make sure that this one in particular, which is this one on my canvas, is a good size. He might be a little bit even oversized than what's in the picture, because he for sure is coming closer to us. So I want to make sure he's a good size. Same with this one. This little guy, I'm going to take him actually off canvas. So the bottom of him, we won't even see the bottom of him probably, because it's just going to be down here. There's not enough room. But I like that approach as well when we're drawing things, that we don't always have to fit the whole image onto the canvas. We can and should do these things that are what I call going off edge, going really off the edge of the canvas, which creates sort of a nice look, a little bit different. And we are trying to be a little bit creative when we are approaching this. So now I'm sort of happy with that. I sort of stand back and have a look and make sure that this is, you know, not too many negative spaces, this kind of thing. So I think the balance of my drawing is okay. And now I'm going to start painting. So I'm going to select a brush. What size is this? It's a 6, in case you're interested. I'm going to put it in the water. Always start with some water. I'm also going to take some off here as well. I'm going to mist my paints as well. Okay, so now I'm going to start with this grape up here. I'm going to start with that one. And I sort of look at it and I think, okay, what kind of colors am I seeing in there? This is what the process I go through in my own little brain, is like, what colors do I see in there? And I think, well, I think I see orange, and so I'm going to, and I went into my CAD red light instead of orange. That's typical. But there we go, some orange. I'm going to add a little bit of white to that to make it opaque. And that's sort of my base. Now I'm looking, thinking, okay, it has a little bit more red, but I don't want to use my cadmium red medium here. I'm going to go to maybe this quinacridone violet and add that to it. And that's going to create that really very orangey red kind of color that I want. And now I'm going to just start putting these on. As you can see, I'm going to go directly onto the canvas today, rather than doing any underpainting. We're going to start this process as well of learning more about, I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to this, of this layering effect, which we were doing more with the lemons, and now we're going to continue doing it more with the grapes. So I'm just going to start putting in some of these nice, I call them yummy colors. And I'm going to put some of that. And you're going to see how when I'm painting with my colors, I keep them connected because they should be connected. And in this way, my colors aren't all over on my palette for one thing. But I do keep my colors that I'm traditionally using, in this case it's going to be all these oranges and reds and stuff, together. And now I'm going to put a little bit more of this in here. Just put a little bit in, and then I can see how the change. Now I'm going to add a little bit of this quinacridone red instead of the magenta. because it's a little pinkier. And then I'm going to put that in here. Then I can see a little bit more orange, then I'm going to come back into this. So I also, when I'm painting, I classify this as a dirty brush. Not dirty as it's got a lot of mud on it, but because I have all the same colors on it. I'm not sort of putting my brush into the water and cleaning it between colors. I want these colors that are still on my brush. Now, another trick, and I must admit this was pointed out to me, and it's something I wasn't really aware that I did particularly. I just sort of do it automatically. On this side of my brush, you're going to see I have these colors, like this. On the other side of my brush is the more orangey sort of colors. So I've got sort of purpley colors on this, purpley reds, and sort of my orangey light cadmium red kind of colors on this side. So I can flip my brush back and forth when I'm painting. So here I added the sort of purpley color over here. Now I can come in and add more of that orangey color, which I can pick up a little bit more of. Now, it's looking like a hodgepodge of colors at the moment, and to be truthful, I don't worry about that, because I know this is just the initial build-up of colors of how and what I'm trying to see. So I don't really, I try to get as close as I can to my colors, but it's not the ultimate, you know, that I'm going to be freaking out that I don't have it exactly as I want it. Because I know that will come. You can see I'm adding a little bit of white to some of these just to make them a little softer, a little bit more opaque. And that's sort of what I want through there. If you're looking at your own photo of the grapes, you can start to see some of these colors that I'm putting down. You might find the best way to handle these segments is to watch me paint, see all the colors that I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and then come through and apply it yourself. Personally, I think it would be an easier way to do it is to watch the whole segment, get a better understanding of what I'm doing, and then come in and try to practice a little bit what I've said. Again, you can see this is just now patches of colors a little bit, but also I'm moving my brush in such a way that I'm getting some curvature to my grape. I'm actually going to clean my brush at the moment because I'm getting a little bit too much purple on it, so I'm going to clean it, push it against the side here, let that water run down so I get all that water off from the handle as well. Little bang on my paper towel, and then I'm ready to go again. Another squirt of water though. And I'm going to now go back into this orangey colors up here. Now I can do, again, I'm layering my colors, but at the same time, I can do what's called a glaze or a wash. So I can come over top of these, and I'm not crazy about that color, so I'm going to stop because I want more of this color in it. Now there probably is a lesson in itself, is knowing when to stop. I will take one brush stroke, and then I will know whether or not my color, what I've been trying to do, is going to be correct or not. One of the things that probably drives me crazy, well, there's a lot of things that drive me crazy. One of the things, though, when I'm teaching is when I'm coming around to a student's work and I'll say, now that's interesting, but you have a lot of that color on there. Is that the color that you wanted? And they'll say no. And I'll say, well, then why were you continuing to use that color then if you didn't like it? Well, I made a lot of it. I didn't know what else to do with it. Okay. So, two, don't make so much of a color. As you can see, I just make small little segments or little circles of color. And then to change a color, I don't try to change. Like for instance, this ultramarine blue that I'm playing with now, because I'm going to use it as a highlight kind of thing, and you'll see what I'll do with it in a minute, is I don't keep adding white to the main segment. I keep sort of pushing it forward a little bit. So I'll come forward again. And so I get this sort of nice gradation of color as I sort of move forward, because I probably will be able to use some of this other color eventually. And then I'll twist my brush a little bit like that too, to get so I don't have tons of paint on it. And that's going to be this nice big bright spot in here when I can hear you all do a big intake of ooh. Now I'm going to just swipe my brush on my paper towel because I don't want to go into the water, but I'm also going to pick up a little bit of purple, add this to this ultramarine blue over here, and then off to the side here I'm going to start adding that color to it, and it will slightly start to soften it a bit, which is what I want to do. I want to soften that edge as it sort of goes up. Now these grapes, I've had people spend hours and hours and hours doing them, and you can just spend oodles of time painting these grapes because they are fun. They are a little on the frustrating side too because there are so many colors. Now that's the other thing I'd like to talk to you about today as well, is you have to realize that when we're looking at, doesn't matter what it is, and you've been learning this a bit as we've been going on, that just because you see sort of these are sort of red grapes, that they aren't really red. They're going to have a multitude of colors in them, and that's what we want to find. That's what we want to use. And as you move along with me and we do some other segments, you're going to see the key thing that I always am stressing is color. You need to see, and will see, the more that we work, more and more color. The more color that you can add to something, the more natural it looks. How about that for a, what is she talking about? Yeah, it's true. The more colors that we can add to something, the more natural it looks. And I'm going to do sort of a light orange because we know orange is our go-to color for edges, that and or purple. And in this case, I'm going to do a little bit of a light orange up here. Now I've got sort of a basic colors happening here. Now I'm going to go back in and start playing with it some more. So now this is where it becomes, I've got sort of a general idea of what I want to do with this grape, and now I can start to layer in some more colors, come over top a few others like this and soften them up, add a little bit more, a little bit deeper, that nice sort of quinacridine violet up here a bit more. And that's going to be as a glaze. In this case, I'm doing a bit of a glaze. So I do a little bit of both between glazing and stacking my colors. So I'm slowly sort of building up what I've got. You're going to find that the more colors and doing it this way, the more depth your picture is going to have, the more depth that your images, whatever they happen to be, are going to have. And that's what we want. We want to create sort of those nice depth of field of color, which is really nice. It helps also with the perspective of our object. If we add more color and the more depth our color does have, the more perspective our object has. And that's, I mean, when you think about it, that's sort of the nature of what we're trying to do. We're trying to create perspective in our work. So we've done it through our basic drawing, but how we continue doing it or improving upon it is through the use of color. Now I can see by my drawing even that this grape is a little fat, which it could be, but I want to change that. So I'm going to add a little bit more to this. I'm going to sort of elongate this guy down here a little bit more so I get that sort of nice length to him, which is what I want. I want that nice length. The other thing I can see is the highlight that I've created here probably can move over a little bit. Whoops. Too much red and too much purple on my brush. So there's a good example of where you have to clean your brush. So I'm going to take some white, put some over here, create another little puddle of ultramarine blue with white, or ultramarine blue with white. Yeah, that's true. I did say it right. I was in my mind, I was thinking I said it wrong, but it was okay. So we're going to put that on here again, a little bit brighter, which is sort of nice. clean my brush, go into this sort of nice sort of puddly orange or purpley kind of color and soften that edge. Now what you're seeing and understanding is that these grapes take a while to do. When I'm teaching these in a regular class, I actually, these take 2 sessions to do. Well, we're not going to do that today because of the magic of cameras. We can sort of move along and do it a little bit quicker. But I want you to sort of see how I'm sort of again working in and sort of softening this up and sort of playing with these colors. Now I would continue playing with these a bit more, but what I want you to see is I'm going to move off to this one, what I call my yummy guy, up at the top here. And this little guy here, has lots of purples and blues and ultramarine. So I'm going to go right into my ultramarine, take some purple, mix them together, and start putting this in. And start developing this guy up a little bit so you can see how we sort of play with him. He's actually quite pretty, this guy. I've got some cobalt blue out as well that I'll use. I'll just sort of smash this in a little bit up there. A little bit more of this quinacridone coming in here. Now when you look at this photo, what you're seeing here as well is a water droplet that's on there. So we get to do a little bit of how to do a water droplet, which is, and you think, oh my gosh, how am I going to do that? Well, it's actually quite easy. What you're going to do is not think that you're doing a water droplet. You're going to see the interesting little colors that are sort of happening there, which is like true of anything, that when we're painting is to think outside the box in a sense. Like, don't be thinking, okay, I'm doing a grape, for instance, or a lemon or an apple or whatever it happened to be. I want you to be thinking of just seeing the curves, the change of color, how we can manipulate just the color itself. That's all I want you to be looking at. It's just the color. Thinking about how you can sort of put that in, how you can change it up. So that little guy is starting to take some shape, which is nice. And I'll just sort of continue on. Interestingly enough, although he's my favorite, he is probably one of the easier ones to do, just because he has some more sort of basic sort of colors that are in there. There's not too many. Now, the colors that I'm using on this grape, you're going to find are the same ones that we can use down in these ones down here. So this grape will have a lot of these colors in it as well, which is another part that I'm really always stressing to people, is not to be jumping all over. Finish off one segment, one area. Try to stay focused into one spot and then move on. But if you are, I think what happens, I do know the psychology behind it, is because you've made up a color and you're afraid that you won't be able to make it again. But our palette is fairly simple. We don't have a lot of colors on here. It is fairly simple, our palette that we've been using, and it's always a good thing just to sort of do that. Keep your palettes fairly simple, and then you can always recreate any of these colors at any time. So try not to think that, you know, you have to keep, and you can see I just swipe my brush too. I don't, especially if I'm going to be, again, sort of keeping into the same colors. And I'm just going to keep playing around with this, and I'll come back to you in a little bit. And we'll see what our grapes are going to be looking like. So as you can see, I've been working on my grapes diligently, and they are fairly complete at this point in time. I decided to make this grape larger in the end because I really decided I really wanted to bring this one forward more. So I really did make him a little bit larger than when we first started, and that's okay. We can have those adjustments as we go along. That's the nature of being an artist. We can change these things. I worked in all my colors. My highlight this time around, I definitely used the pale blue. As you can see, the ultramarine, very, very white with a tiny little bit of ultramarine light in it, so we can get that really nice, strong blue color. I can add a little bit more of this cobalt into here, a little bit more, probably add a little bit. I can see some of these spots that I would like to sort of lighten up and sort of add a little bit more blue into it, just because I like this color, especially for this little guy. As I've mentioned before, he's my favorite. We always have our favorites. This is my favorite in this guy. The other thing that I want you to be aware of is that we do know that dark colors come forward. Primary colors bring things forward. So even on here, I'm going to do a little bit of a darker spot right through here, and that's going to bring that edge of this grape a little bit closer to us. Now I added, as you can see, purple, but with ultramarine blue. So the ultramarine blue, being a primary, is going to really help bring this edge of this grape forward a little bit. And then I'm just going to soften off the edges a little bit, so they're a little bit softer. You're also going to find that within the photograph itself, the edges are quite dark. You do not want to go there, as it were. You do not want to make your edges so dark, because we've already agreed dark things do come forward. So if we make our edges too dark, instead of our edges rounding off as we want them to, we're going to make those edges come forward. So this is another part of this lesson that you're learning, is how to interpret your photos. Not only did we crop it to make it more interesting and how we wanted it, but also we've learned how to interpret our tonal values so our objects, parts of them, come forward more over other parts. And the parts that we want to come forward are, in this case, the very roundy parts, right, of the grape, as it were. And I'm adding more blue over top of some of this purple, just so I can, because blue is a primary, purple itself is a secondary color. I'm going to take my finger and sort of just, fingers came before brushes, and we can sort of soften that part off a little bit. And I'm going to soften that up a little bit. Going to soften this part through here. This line is too dark. Watch what happens now when I take this sort of softer purple and go right over that dark spot there, rounds it right off. Right through here, rounds it off. So this is part of what I do towards the end of when I'm painting, is now I go through my edges, around my objects, to see where I can sort of lighten things up, soften them up. We've also learned from past fruit, with our apple and our orange and our lemons, how to sort of round our edges off. We were doing it through lighter colors. We also can do it, and I'll clean my brush so I can show you again, is to do this off edge. So I'm going to take a little bit of this sort of orangey color, and when we go off edge, it's going to be a little bit too light, we're going to just slightly go off the edge of the grape. So we're not creating that cookie cutter look. We want it, and it's just here and there. We just need to go off edge, and it will round our edges. Orange is, as I say, the go-to color to do this primarily. It doesn't have to be orange all the time, but primarily it is orange. The other go-to color is purple. But I'm going to use orange in this case because it's going to add a little bit of warmth as well. Orange is a warm color, and it's going to add a little bit more warmth to what is overall sort of, because we've used so many blues and purples and stuff, a cool image. The color in behind that I've used is a combination of purple with a lot of white and some orange in it. And that creates, both of them are secondary colors, purple and orange, both of them are secondary colors. So they're good colors, a good combination to put in the background. I'm going to just add a little bit of more white to some of this yellow on the stems. Now again, white lightens, does not brighten. And you're going to see in some of these spots, adding more of a lighter yellow is going to push some of these stems back a little bit. And that's what I want. I find the yellow that I have on here in some spots a little bit too dark. And I'm going to just put a little bit of this lighter yellow here and there, which will again sort of soften that up. We've learned a lot by doing our grapes. We've learned how, again, to see how we can put our colors in stacking them. We did some glazing as well to sort of change colors up. How to use our blue in this case for highlights, especially in these little gems. Again, softening edges, how to do it, 2 ways to do it, with color as well as going off edge. Once we've done our background, once your background has to be done to do that, and then you go off edge. You're starting to learn that white lightens, does not brighten. And that's a term that I'll use often, and you'll hear me say that when you tune into some of my the future episodes that I'll be doing, that you'll hear that a lot. And primary colors come forward, darker colors come forward, softer colors go away from us. Secondary, softer colors, and things that go away from us, in this case, are edges. Well, I think that sort of wraps it up. I hope you had a really good time. I had a great time with you and teaching you how to do an apple, an orange, a lemon, and now some grapes. And I look forward to seeing you in my next episodes, which will be coming up soon. See you then. Bye. Now, I decided that it would be sort of nice to see all 4 of our paintings together and to do a recap of all the things that you've learned in these lessons, because you have learned a lot. With the red apple, we learned about how to apply red and green together. We did an underpainting, first of all, with green to enhance our reds. We started to use nice brush strokes to enhance our curvature of our object. We did a bit of a wash or a glaze over top of certain areas to enhance them as well, to bring them out stronger. We learned how important a background color is to enhance whatever our object is, and how in this case this really lovely green really helps to pop that red, which is perfect. With our orange, we moved on to and found out that if we applied more yellow, which is a primary to our orange color, that we're able to sort of brighten that up. Yellow is our go-to color to brighten something, to brighten any color. We also found that in using more of a primary color, in this case red, through in this area in particular, also helps to bring things forward. So our primary colors, red, yellow, or blue, all help to bring areas forward. That our cooler colors, like we did with the apple as well, help to push areas further away. We started to talk about how to soften our edges by either applying soft orange in this case, and to go a slightly off edge. Going off edge means to make our edges a little blurrier, so it doesn't get that cookie cutter sort of stamped out look, which is what we don't want. Very few objects, I can't think of any, that have really hard edges. So we are starting to learn how to soften our edges. So we applied, again, we're starting to use 2 colors that we know that really help with our highlights, yellow in this case, and up here we use some blue. Those are both primary colors. With our lemons, we started to figure out how to apply or put down 2 objects down. We started to map out our objects so they looked balanced on our canvas. We also found that how to intensify our yellows by applying color on top of color on top of color, because it's not always are you going to be able to achieve the exact color that you want with the first, as I say, the first brush stroke or the second brush stroke or the third. Sometimes it's the 4th and 5th, or 6th and 7th, to get the intensity of color that we want. So you're also learning about patience, about how to realize that it's not all going to come together immediately. So we did an underpainting of these two as well, using purple, don't forget. We softened our edges. We put some nice soft orange into our yellow to soften it. We also added some green, again, another secondary color towards the back of our lemons, and chose a really interesting background color to, again, pop that yellow. When we came to our grapes, now we're into brush strokes, we're into using our colors correctly, we're starting to think about how our primary colors come forward, our secondary colors on our edges help to round our edges off. And I started to talk about that method of stacking colors, of putting color beside color so we don't overblend. We're trying to get away from that overblending of colors, because when we do that, we lose the integrity of our colors. It all becomes like a oneness, which we don't want. And you can see in the grapes, you were learning about how to take a photo, how to crop it, how to enlarge and to go oversize on our things, to take things off edge, which is always an interesting thing to do. Makes a little bit more of a creative statement, which is nice. And a sort of an interesting background. We didn't do an underpainting for our grapes because there's so many colors in them. I just always feel it's not necessary. I just think the orange background that we use to prep our canvases is more than sufficient. You're going to see that the edges on these are not finished. And it's one of these things that I like, that we use a stretch canvas, because now what you can do is take a very neutral color, like a very dark green or a dark blue, and finish off your edges. Just finish these off. And that just sort of cleans it all up, so when you hang it up on the wall, it looks really neat and tidy, and you don't have all these raggedy little colors that are sort of coming across on the edges for things. The other thing that I haven't talked about too much, and I know you've been noticing it probably sitting on my table here when I've been painting, is this product, which is a glaze. Now, I used to be very adamant that you don't have to use a glaze when you paint, because I teach a method where you use so little water that our colors still maintain that sort of shininess about them. But, there's always a but, I find that with students, a lot of times you overwork your work a bit too much, and that's natural because you're starting to learn. So to put that sheen back into your work, so it gives an overall evenness about it all, you can take one of these products, which is really quite nice. This one I like is a satin. Golden is the only one that I've found that actually has a satin or low gloss, mid gloss, low gloss, whatever, effect. And so what I do, I don't paint with it because I don't like the sense, and you can, but I don't like how it changes the consistency of the paint for me, which I'm not quite happy with at this point. So I just do my usual technique, and then at the very end, I just take a bunch of this and just sort of glob it onto the top of the canvas, take a brush, and then just sort of brush back and forth one way, do like this, and then back this way, and then back this way again. It comes out sort of a milky looking substance. Don't be fooled by that, because it dries nice and clear. I've done that on all of these. And it's very hard to see, it's very subtle, the changes, and that's what I want. But it does create a really nice lasting finish for your work. And so I do recommend it. I think it's a good thing to use. I think we have come to the conclusion of all of this. We have covered so much, and I hope you have enjoyed coming and visiting me in my studio and painting along with me, because I've really enjoyed having you. We will be videoing some new products soon. I'll be letting you know more about that later. But in the meantime, keep painting what you have learned from here, and I'll see you soon. Now here we start our first of our 5 segments in learning how to paint with acrylic paints. The most important part of this whole process is learning about color and how we can use it. So But before we can use it, we have to understand it first, okay? So, as you can see, I have some very high-tech stuff here behind me that we're going to use. So, I know some of you are rolling your eyes, those of you audiophiles out there, whatever, that, you know, with all your cell phones and everything else. But this works. So, here we go. Our three primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. Primary colors are named for just that because they mean first. They do come forward. So in our paintings, if we want an area to come forward, to stand out, it's the main focal point. You're going to use one of your primary colors, okay? The other thing is that two of these colors, yellow and blue, you're going to learn are the two colors that we use primarily for highlights on our work. Now, if we combine two of these colors, red and blue, yellow and blue, blue and red, we're going to create a secondary color, okay? So in our secondary colors, if we combine, for instance, yellow and blue, we produce green. If we combine red and blue together, we're going to create purple. The last one, if we combined red and yellow, we're going to produce orange. Don't you love this high-tech stuff? It works so well. So now we have our secondary colors, and there are three of those as well. Now, they do line up in with red and green going together, yellow and purple, and blue and orange. And there is a reason for that, because they are complementary to each other. So secondary colors are also called complementary as well. These colors as well, they're secondary. So in other words, they're not as important as our primary colors. So our secondary colors are colors that we use, say, in shadows, on the edges of things, in sort of, say, the mountain range or whatever in our painting. So these are colors that we're going to use that are sort of areas that are further away, or to round our edges, which are also areas that are further away from us. So how are we going to remember that red and green go together? Well, I give you a clue. It's sort of when that big red guy comes down the chimney. That's right, Christmas. These are Christmas colors. Yellow and purple, there is a holiday that we can think of, little bunnies jumping around. Yeah, Easter colors. And the last one, blue and orange, that's Halloween. So now we have Christmas, Easter, Halloween. This is how we're going to remember how our primary and its complementary go together. We've learned what our primary colors are, red, yellow, blue. We've learned about the three complementary or secondary colors and how they match up with those primary colors so we can remember Christmas, Easter, Halloween. Now you're going to learn how to use those colors, how you're going to apply them as a painter, and that's quite a different animal altogether. So here we go. So I'm going to take you on a little journey here about learning how colors work together. You're going to find, I've put down here 3 red circles. Now around those, 2 of those red circles, I did a light green around one and a darker green around the third. You're going to find that this one, the red is going to appear slightly brighter. It may even to your eye appear slightly larger. This red, even though it's the same as the first one that we started with as well, with the dark green around it, the red is going to appear slightly darker. So there is one way that we've now learned how to apply our primary and its complementary. So we know if we put its complementary around it, it's going to affect the tonal value of that color. That's one way. Another way that we're going to learn is that we can put a color underneath This red circle has just orange underneath it. You can see a little bit of orange sort of peeking underneath. So it sort of brightened that red up because it has orange underneath it. The other way is that we're going to put the green underneath it. So I've got the orange, then I did a green circle on top of the orange, and then I did the red on top of it. So now this red circle, compared to this one, is going to have more intensity because it actually has its complementary underneath it. That's another way that we've learned how color can affect, especially the primary and its complementary. The last way is you're going to see how if we mix them together. So this circle, I think I probably started with orange first, and then I mixed on my palette red and green together, and I created a very dark red. So say I didn't have a dark red in my arsenal of tubes of paint, I can make a dark red by adding its complementary to it. In this case, the primary red is complementary green to create a nice dark red. So the three things that we need to remember mostly is putting the color near each other, how it affects each other, putting the color underneath, which is called an underpainting of the color underneath it, and mixing it. So there's three ways that we know how to use color now. Probably you may not have known before, but it's going to help us when we move forward now with our painting, and especially our red apple, which is going to be our first painting that we're going to do together. See you soon.